It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us to talk about our weaknesses and how we can embrace them. The unlikely secret to changing the world is Shannon Evans. Thanks for being here, Shannon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, what is your greatest weakness?
Oh, oh man.
It's like a job interview.
I know. Just don't beat around the bush. Just get right to it. I think, there's so many of them that are coming to mind of like, well, it depends on what angle you want to talk about. But really, when I wrote the book, it was with this in mind that I had this desire to change the world, to make an impact, to do really great things, to be like one of the saints that you're telling your great-grandchildren about or whatever. But for me, embracing my weakness really was coming to recognize my own smallness and my own limitations, and even the inability to actually do the things that I want to do. I don't remember what scripture verse it is, but it's St. Paul who writes, like, I don't do what I want to do. I want to do what I don't do.
Right.
It's like we have these compulsions and these convictions, but we find ourselves falling so short and then numbing out in all kinds of ways, whether it be, recognized addictions or social media or anything like that, to kind of keep the beast down, the beast of disappointment, to keep him quiet so that we can kind of coast through life. But when we really stop and examine ourselves, at least it's been true for me, certainly, that coming to terms with my own limitations has really freed me to be more loving to other people and to be more empathetic and compassionate. And so it's been a real gift in my life.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to admit our weaknesses? I mean, everybody has weaknesses. That's just a given. Why is it hard for us to admit that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's no denying that the cultural messages are so against showing weakness. We even have our never let them see you sweat or boys don't cry and things like that. But I think just culturally, we really esteem success and power and wealth, and even within Christianity in our own way, we have, we look up to the people who seem like the wisest or the most spiritual or the ones who have it all together. But so we want to be like that too, or we want to be the ones who have something to offer, not the ones who are in need. And I think that's a human affliction that we all share, but certainly our cultural messages play into that a lot.
And I think sometimes when we look at the saints, we see these perfect figures that we never hear about their mistakes. But in other cases, like St. Augustine or St. Paul, we hear about these flawed individuals that had a past and are kind of redeeming that, but at the same time realizing that they're still making mistakes as we are considering them to be saints. So how do we see weakness within Christianity maybe different than outside of Christianity?
Yeah, I think the core of the gospel is so hopeful about weakness, and I am so grateful that the messages really are, if we are able to kind of focus on the gospel rather than the society that we live in, it is so hopeful, because I write in the book, but Jesus, even the incarnation itself, Jesus taking on human flesh, becoming human, is the epitome of embraced weakness, giving up what it is to be only divine, what it is to not have to suffer in the way that human beings do, not just physically, but emotionally and relationally. And so it's such a beautiful affirmation of our humanity and of the fact that weakness is, it can be a gift. Certainly it's not an excuse to just stay in sin, but it can be a gift to, as it did with Jesus, to unite us more deeply to other people, as his incarnation did. It's a lot easier. I mean, speak for myself, but I think it's true for all of us. Like, there's something about his human experience, him taking on flesh, that we feel so much more personal than rather this idea of a God in the sky, And I think that's something that's so unique and beautiful about Christianity that we are given. And so in the same way, it translates in our lives of living out the gospel means making ourselves vulnerable to each other and kind of humanizing the other in this day and age that can be so divisive, But once we really kind of open up about the truth of our own souls, for better or for worse, then we can really find a lot of common ground.
We're talking about Embracing Weakness, the Unlikely Secret to Changing the World with Shannon Evans. And how is this the unlikely secret to changing the world?
Good question. I believe it is because power and strength and success is admirable, and we have a lot of respect for it. But it's in its nature, it's separative. It makes me feel like I will never achieve that. That person is something that I will never be. And I might look up to them, but I will never really feel a communion with them. But when we kind of level the playing field and embrace our weakness and allow it to birth compassion for others and empathy for others and a shared vulnerability where we actually have real relationships with one another and not like I'm wearing a mask and you're wearing a mask, I think that is where fruitful conversations can happen. That is where we encounter, especially as Christians, we do ministry and service and works of mercy from a place of relational equality rather than I'm the benevolent giver extending something, to the person in need. But I think that's what changes the world, is that everything is reciprocal, that relationships can be both ways, that we recognize that everybody has something to give and that we need things from other people. And it's more life-giving than keeping ourselves behind a mask.
Yeah, and I think that whole idea of being independent and stressing constantly that we don't need anybody else is really kind of a damaging thing to the faith when we're supposed to be a community and we're supposed to be helping each other out and we're supposed to be depending on not only each other but depending on God. And when we don't realize that, I guess, what is the first step to recognizing our weaknesses?
I love what you said. I think that's absolutely true about the Christian community and even our relationship with God. And the first step, I think, is really to stop numbing, which is really hard because it can be hard to identify what we really do feel or what we actually are struggling with, because it's so easy to just stay busy, when we're feeling those ugly feelings, to just scroll through social media or to run out and go to Target and buy some stuff or go, drive through and get some food or just anything to push those places down. And I guess in some ways what that is it's requiring a life of prayer from us to kind of discipline ourselves to stop the madness, stop the consuming and the numbing, and really open up ourselves before God and have to confront what it is we're actually dealing with rather than self-medicating.
So when we look at our weaknesses, how do we know if it's something that we should overcome, a weakness that we should kind of look for a way to improve in versus something that we should embrace?
Right. Well, I don't necessarily think it's either or, because okay. I would certainly never advise anybody to just say, well, this is the way I am and I'm never going to change. I think we're certainly called to a life of sanctification and always moving forward in our struggles, certainly in our sin pattern. But I do think that there is something to kind of embracing this idea that I am not God. I am not better than so-and-so. I think embracing it doesn't mean not continuing to work to change it, but at the same time kind of letting it put you in your rightful place, kind of letting it level out that pride issue that most of us have. But also weakness in the terms of St. Therese of Lisieux, of the littleness, the smallness of kind of letting yourself be the flower and let God be the gardener, but not kind of clinging to that control. So I think it can mean sinful things or things that need to change, but it can also just be the reality of how small it is to be human, you know?
So I guess, yeah, what do we mean by embracing a weakness then? We've recognized our weakness, then what does embracing it look like?
Yeah. That's it. I would say that it's about letting yourself be changed by whether it be your disappointment in yourself or your frustration with yourself or the sufferings that you've gone through that maybe aren't a result of your sin, but just the result of life being difficult. Embracing those things, I think, means letting it transform you, letting it soften you to the experience of other people, and being able to be more present, being able to be more merciful because you have needed mercy, you know, because you've recognized those times that you've been through that. I think that is the embrace of the weaknesses, rather than, you know, being hardened by life, but like really actually letting yourself be softened, but both by your own faults and by what has happened to you.
All right. Well, I know this is going to be such a great thing. I think vulnerability and that whole talk about vulnerability has been such a big topic lately, and tying this into the faith and how we can grow by recognizing our weakness, I think is really important. So where should we send people to learn more about what you're doing and also get a copy of the book?
Yeah, the book is being published, or has been published, by Our Sunday Visitor, so you can head to their website at osbbookstore.com. I believe that's the website. It's also available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. My website is shannonKevans.com, and I'm on Instagram at ShannonKEvans.
All right. And I know the website, osvcatholicbookstore.com, will bring it up
there you go.
For sure. But people can just
Thank
do a search
you.
for it as well. Embracing Weakness, the Unlikely Secret to Changing the World. Shannon Evans, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions. I appreciate it.